It is an honor for me to hold the Arctic Science Ministerial for the first time in Asia with joint chairmanship with Minister Lydia Alfredsdottir of Republic of Iceland, the presidency of Arctic Council. I hereby declare the third Arctic Science Ministerial, ASM3, to be open. As an organizer, I would like to share a few words at the beginning. Due to the pandemic of COVID-19, ministers and representatives of indigenous peoples' organizations were unable to come to Japan. Yet, we welcome your virtual presence with us and extend our gratitude to the representatives of embassies who are here with us in this room. The first ASM was organized by the US in 2016 in Washington, D.C., and second was jointly organized by EU, Finland, and Germany in 2018 in Berlin. Let me thank the countries who took initiatives in the past ASMs. 28 countries and 6 indigenous peoples organizations are present for ASM3, the largest ever participants. We thank all the people who took time to join us.
Good morning and konbanwa to our dear friends in Tokyo. Greetings to my colleagues meeting today from 28 different countries and joined by respected indigenous leaders from around the Arctic. I would like to begin by warmly thanking my co-host, Minister Koichi Hagudita. The fact that we are here today is a testament of the determination and spirit of our friends in Japan. We are very grateful for the smooth and fruitful collaboration between our two countries in preparation for the Ministerial. We expect that our relationship will continue to build, especially after signing a memorandum of cooperation between our ministries just this morning. It is my great pleasure to be with you all here today for the third Arctic Science Ministerial. Some time has passed and a great deal has changed since our last meeting in Berlin in 2018. It is a tribute to our hosts from Germany, Finland, and the European Commission that the spirit of the previous Arctic Science Ministerial has carried us all the way through this one. An incredible amount of work has been done leading up to this ministerial by all the participating countries and indigenous peoples organizations. The goal of the ASM3 science process has to build our understanding of the activities and opportunities in international Arctic research in a transparent and inclusive manner. This holistic approach is in support of our overall theme of the ASM3, Knowledge for Sustainable Arctic. The result of this work is now evident in a comprehensive ASM3 report, a publicly accessible webinar series, and an ambitious and forward-leading joint statement by ministers. When we last met, we could not have known that a pandemic would keep many of us from gathering again in person from time being. Here in Iceland, we have not only been impacted by COVID-19 for the past year, but we have also experienced nearly 50,000 earthquakes this year alone, followed by an ongoing volcanic eruption in Fagradalsfjall, just next to our international airport. Nevertheless, our work of international science cooperation must go on, especially as we face challenges at a global scale where our joint efforts are so deeply needed. The challenges of the last year has also helped us focus on new ways of working together, highlighting demand for innovation in the Arctic research. In this respect, we introduced the ASM3 webinar seminars to continue our dialogue when most meetings were either postponed or cancelled. For this ASM, we have received over 400 projects, updates, and new projects from countries and organizations. We are not only tracking and monitoring this process, but also finding new ways to highlight opportunities in this joint cooperation. The ASM themes are all interconnected and build on one another for equal importance. Taken together, they give us a more holistic understanding and opportunities, as well as gaps and barriers in Arctic research. We all have a role to play in science and research, where some may have the resources to implement large scientific infrastructures, others may offer deep knowledge and understanding of their local ecosystem. I believe that we are stronger together. The threat of climate change is grave and immediate. Our collective efforts to both adapt to and reverse this threat must be quick and strong with the spirit of cooperation. In Iceland, we cherish our historic role in the Arctic to serve as hosts for meaningful dialogue. In addition to this important ministerial meeting today, Iceland will be hosting the Arctic Council Ministerial in Reykjavik in just a few weeks. Although not formally connected, the Arctic Science Ministerial supports the science-driven work of the Arctic Council. ASM3 provides a promising opportunity for those engaged in Arctic science to work together in our joint efforts. It has been our great pleasure to work in partnership with Japan as co-hosts for this meeting. As non-Arctic state with decades-long history in Arctic research, Japan has been a wonderful partner to Iceland in planning for this ministerial. As we move forward into the meeting today, let us remember that this is not the conclusion of our joint efforts, but rather jumping off point from which we can dive into action set forth by this meeting. I look forward to the proceedings over the next 2 days as we hear from each distinguished representative from our 4 different themes of the ASM3, as well as updates from the Science Advisory Board. I have looked forward to this meeting with great anticipation for several months, although it must be said that it is unfortunate that we are not in Tokyo together as planned. The high level of participation and interest in these meetings gives me a renewed hope during these challenging times. Thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. As co-chairs, let us work together to make this conference a success. As this is the first time to hold the ASM in Asia, we have a video message from Mr. Suga, Prime Minister of Japan. Please watch. I am Suga Yoshihide, Prime Minister of Japan. Climate change is said to be the major cause for the extreme weather, including torrential rains, forest fires, and heavy snowfall occurring around the world in recent years. In particular, the ice could disappear in the summer in the Arctic Ocean as early as the 2030s. Right now, the issues triggered by climate change are major challenges that we can lose no time to respond to. For that, I have declared that Japan will be carbon neutral by 2050 and have set very ambitious targets for carbon reduction by 2030. At this third Arctic Science Ministerial, your discussion will include the topic of how to enrich the scientific data on the Arctic region. I expect that this science-based discussion will greatly contribute to solving climate problems, not only for the indigenous people living in the Arctic region, but for the entire globe. With that recognition, Japan is very honored to be able to co-host this ministerial meeting with Iceland. I hope that your active discussions at this meeting will be a big step forward for solving this pressing problem that is impacting all humankind.
ただいま
So, as being said by the Prime Minister, this conference is going to be a very important conference for the betterment of the situation of the Arctic. I hope that we will have a very active discussion. The ASM3 focuses on dialogue with scientific community. Science Advisory Board, SAB, has been greatly contributing to this scientific process. So I would like to ask SAB to report on their scientific process. So, as a representative SAB member from Iceland, Dr. Embra L. Ostoteo and also Dr. Hiroyuki Enomoto will be sharing their words.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is a pleasure to be with you here today during this important event. Myself and my colleague Enomoto will provide you with a brief overview of the ASM3 process. Next slide, please. The first Arctic Science Ministerial was an initiative started by the United States in 2016. The intention was to increase international collaboration and advance Arctic research activities. This meeting was a groundbreaking idea to further cooperative efforts in international research and included science ministers from 24 different countries. Next slide, please. In 2018, delegations from 26 different countries came together in Berlin for ASM2 to discuss the collective efforts of international research cooperation in the Arctic. This meeting was hosted by Germany, Finland, and the European Commission, which introduced the idea of having an Arctic and non-Arctic state work together as ASM hosts. Next slide, please. As hosts of ASM3, Iceland and Japan arrived at the overarching theme, Knowledge for a Sustainable Arctic, and developed 4 sub-themes under the titles Observe, Understand, Respond, and Strengthen. These reflect elements of the previous ASM themes and reintroduce an emphasis on education, which appeared in ASM1. These themes should be viewed as a 4-step iterative cycle, with each theme informing the next without hierarchy. Next slide, please. The Science Advisory Board was brought together under the guiding principles for ASM3 to be transparent, inclusive, and implement a bottom-up approach to science. Therefore, representatives were nominated to serve on the board from different international Arctic science organizations by the organizations to help guide the science process of ASM3. We will hear from a few other members of the board during the ministerial as they provide a scientific overview for each theme. Next slide, please. The ASM3 science process followed the structure of ASM2 by soliciting project updates and new projects from participating countries, indigenous peoples' organizations, and international organizations, while also attempting to create a formal consultation process with the wider research community. Notably for this ASM, the working groups of the Arctic Council were invited to contribute projects through the science process as other international organizations. Next slide, please. A consultation process with the wider research community also took place through the 6th International Symposium on Arctic Research, the ASM Research Community Workshops, a joint effort between IASC, IASA, and APEX, and the Arctic Observing Summit, who submitted a direct call to action to the ASM3 ministers. The outcomes of these consultation processes can all be found in the ASM3 report. New to this ASM was a survey on international collaboration and cooperation, which was sent to all participating countries and organizations. The aim of this survey was to collect some much needed information and feedback to help identify gaps and barriers in Arctic research, which also addressed specifically in the Gaps and Barriers workshop as part of the ASM3 webinar series. The ASM3 webinar series also included a special event specifically focused on Indigenous peoples' participation in the ASM3 process. In this series, all 6 international Arctic Indigenous peoples organizations participated, discussing the importance of inclusion of the knowledge of Indigenous peoples in Arctic science and research, and the important role this plays in sustainability. And now I would like to invite my colleague Enomoto to take the floor. Thank you.
Okay, so I will continue the reporting from the Science Advisory Board. You can see the science process report. This all 433 of these formal project submissions by countries and organizations were reviewed, discussed, and synthesized by the Science Advisory Board. And so each submission includes detailed project information, and you can see the word cloud, the keywords was appearing: collaboration, climate community monitoring, and many important issues are synthesized in this report. And each submission includes detailed project information. The sheet is very small, but each submission has the information of the duration of the project or research and staff involved, and keywords, and also location, collaborators, and also ASM themes. So discussed in the SAB. And all of these projects submit compiled in this sheet. So please look at the report after this meeting very carefully, and you can see the contribution of each country. And make this sheet shows the making note of the new project submit and the project update from ASM2. So below you can see the number 433 in total. And the next slide, this slide gives us a look at the collaborations by country as well as breakdown of the project submitted by theme. So left side is project collaboration by country. So each country has many collaboration country, but so you can see which country is dominant for collaboration activities. And many of these key projects were best exemplified international cooperation, and that cooperation was highlighted in the ASM3 webinar series. So this is science summary. The science summary was prepared by SAB, Science Advisory Board. All subject projects were reviewed by the Science Advisory Board members, and this team evaluated the progress made since ASM2 and highlighted some key projects under each theme. The ASM3 science summary found in the ASM3 report includes this synthesized information from this process. And this is a project database. This brand new online database maps all the projects submitted to the ASM3 process. This makes it easy easy access ongoing project and can be used as a tool to accelerate collaborations. And this is a page introducing the joint statement. These foundational outcomes are the joint statement of ministries, and the accompanied the ASM3 final report. The Science Advisory reviewed all the submitted science and helped to identify key action as well as identified gap and barrier which could be highlighted in the joint statement of ministers as well as explored in the final report. Overview of the actions in the joint statement will be introduced by the Science Advisory Board members in the sessions during the ministerial. Below you can see the SAB member names. So, who SAB member will guide to the 4 themes of the ASM3. And final outcomes. The intention of this wide-reaching science process was to have a robust and inclusive science process to provide a strong foundation for all the final outcome of the ASM3. Hopefully, these final outcomes create useful tool for cooperation, deepen our understanding of both the achievement and challenges that lay ahead, and provide a strong framework for taking urgent action. We also developed some new online resources, including recording of all the webinar series, a list of international opportunities and resources, and a new project database mapping all the ASM3 summit project. Okay, thank you very much.
オズドテル氏、榎本博士、ありがとうございました。これからの北極研究を
Thank you very much, Dr. Embla and Dr. Enomoto. We had wonderful message to develop the Arctic research in the future. I would like to respect the message from the scientists and have a discussion. And with that, I close the opening session.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Hagiuda, for presiding the opening session. We are a little bit ahead of schedule, but I would like to propose to move on to session number 1. I'm Ikukawa Hiroshi, Director General of Research and Development Bureau of Max Japan, and I'm going to preside session number 1 and session number 2. In this ASM3, we have 4 sub-themes under the main theme of knowledge for a sustainable Arctic. Those 4 sub-themes are observe, understand, respond, and strengthen. During this 2-day meeting, we are going to have 4 sessions which correspond to these 4 sub-themes respectively. And the topic of the first session, session number 1, is going to be observe. Before we start our discussions, I would like to invite Dr. Hayo Aiken from the Science Advisory Board to make some introductory overview. Dr. Aiken, you have 5 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ikukawa-san. I appreciate the opportunity to give you a brief perspective on theme 1 of ASM3, Observe. This represents work by my fellow Science Advisory Board members, and I'd also like to acknowledge the ASM3 organizing team and Jenny Baseman. If I could have the next slide, please. In terms of the relevancy and urgency of sustained observations of Arctic change, 2 recent reports that came out since the last Arctic Science Ministerial by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change are particularly relevant. You see a summary figure here from the special report on the oceans and the cryosphere that had an Arctic section, and highlights the importance of observations that are critical in terms of addressing some of the hazards and risks associated with warming in the Arctic. The IPCC highlights and summarizes findings that the 1.5 degrees centigrade global warming, which will be amplified by a factor of 2 to 3 or more in the Arctic, will be associated with severe and widespread impacts, including irreversible and persistent climate-related hazards. And of course, as you're aware, many of these have global repercussions, but also, as you see highlighted in the figure on the right, greatly impact the livelihoods of the indigenous peoples of the Arctic. Observations are critical in this context, both to identify and track hazards, to inform different options on responses, and more broadly, to underpin the support of livelihoods and the health of Arctic and global systems. The next slide, please. The Arctic Science Ministerial itself is highly relevant and represents the urgency of some of the actions that previous speakers have already alluded to. We find that the speed of change is challenging conventional response mechanisms, both on the research side, but also in terms of the government's mechanisms that allow us to respond to some of these challenges and opportunities. At the same time, the urgency that has been highlighted and emphasized by Arctic indigenous peoples taxes communities and calls for additional capacity building that the ASM3 is very timely in addressing. As you're well aware, transboundary and global impacts require internationally collaborative approaches that focus on shared benefits, and the approach of the third Arctic Science Ministerial to recognize that iterative and rapidly adaptive approaches are needed is highly commendable, as we're seeing the feeding of observations into improved understanding, formulation and execution of response actions, and an overall strengthening, which in turn then leads to further more focused and more beneficial observations. The next slide gives you a brief perspective on some of the progress made since the second Arctic Science Ministerial. I'd like to highlight the 3 top categories of advances. You're well aware and have already heard from previous speakers about some of the inventories that have been underway. Several countries and broader international efforts in various parts of the Arctic have been conducting sustained observations of a rapidly changing Arctic. And many of these, in particular through the push that the second Arctic Science Ministerial has provided, have focused very much on the societal benefits and the value that observations provide in a broader international context. The challenge that we're facing is how to allow individual scientists, many of the researchers or research teams that are represented in the observations and projects submitted to the Science Ministerial, how to allow them to contribute to a broader overarching shared goal and ensure that observations are of value both at the local scale, driven ideally by local information needs and local guidance, including indigenous people's guidance on high priority observations, but also meeting global information and benefit needs. You see now emerging the progress that has made in terms of so-called essential variable frameworks that are informed by a lot of the prior work that is highlighted here. I'd just like to point out the Circumpolar Biodiversity Monitoring Program, shown as an example here, with very specific guidance now emerging on the types of observations, which variables, where and in what form, what are more specific requirements being slowly identified. And critical in this context is the Sustaining Arctic Observing Networks Initiative under the Arctic Council and the International Arctic Science Committee, so a body that unites both Arctic and non-Arctic countries, and its roadmap for Arctic observing and data systems, which is now getting underway and providing a broader framework for different contributions to ensure the greatest value for all of those in need of and benefiting from sustained Arctic observations. The next and final slide then gives you a perspective, a bit more of a glimpse into some of the projects that have been submitted to the Arctic Science Ministerial number 3. All of these, of course, are now accessible in the database that Inamoto-san already referred to earlier. You see a range of different categories of contributions, and this is something that you can review on your own or delve into more depth if you're interested as part of the Arctic Science Ministerial webinars. But the key points to highlight here are that we're seeing an increasing affiliation or association of observations with existing networks and existing frameworks that allows direct contribution and benefits to an overarching larger whole. We're also seeing ready access to data increasing, but more work is needed as a more detailed analysis of these submitted projects reveals. And finally, it's great to see 9 projects submitted here identified with Indigenous involvement or leadership, but clearly in the broader picture, still comparatively few efforts with Indigenous leadership and participation, something that the hope is that initiatives such as the Say on Roads process will help alleviate in the future. I appreciate the opportunity for this overview, and I hand it back to the session moderator. Thank you.
Mr. Dr. Aiken, for your wonderful and informative introductory overview. Now we are going to have 9 countries and organizations to make some remarks in this session. I'm going to name the representatives in alphabetical order of the countries or organizations. When you are asked to speak, please turn on your microphone and camera. Also, please keep your remarks within 3 minutes due to the time constraint. Having said that, I would first like to ask the representative of India to make some remarks. Minister Vardhan of India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, good evening, colleagues. I am happy to represent India at this 3rd Arctic Science Ministerial. On behalf of the Government of India, I would like to thank the Government of Iceland and Japan for organizing this 3rd Arctic Science Ministerial in this challenging time due to the COVID pandemic. ASM3 is the first ministerial meeting regarding Arctic issues being held in Asia. This highlights the importance of scientific cooperation among both Arctic and non-Arctic states in order to deepen our understanding of the Arctic region. India considers the Arctic and the Antarctic as integral parts of the global climate system, which require long-term monitoring and research. The Arctic region is of special importance due to its critical role in governing global climate, sea levels, and biodiversity. As we all know, the Arctic is warming much faster than other regions. The impact of Arctic warming and its ice melt is not a problem only to the Arctic but also to the entire globe. The Arctic and high latitudes are the drivers of the tropical climate and therefore of interest and great importance to India. There is growing evidence of strong teleconnection between the Arctic and the Indian Ocean, which modulates the monsoon pattern in India. Therefore, today more than ever, there is a need to understand the processes better and quantify the impact of Arctic melt, especially on the Asian monsoon patterns, and to enhance our collective understanding of the Arctic region. Constant monitoring and observation is going to be crucial. ASM 3 also emphasizes this need to strengthen the observations both in situ and remote sensing. Though India has an observational program in the Svalbard region to monitor ocean parameters by deploying IND-ARC mooring in the fjord and other atmospheric observations, we plan to contribute observing system in the Arctic both in situ and remote sensing in the coming years. Towards this, we plan to deploy open ocean mooring in the Arctic for long-term monitoring of upper ocean variables and marine meteorological parameters. We also plan to launch NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar Satellite or NISR mission in collaboration with USA with the goal to make global measurements of the cause and consequences of land surface changes using advanced radar imaging. This will be our contribution to the sustained Arctic observational network. We are open to more collaborations with other countries in strengthening observational system in the Arctic. We are also pleased to share our data with international community to further expand our understanding of the Arctic processes. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the importance of the Arctic region, not just to India but to the whole world. India would continue to play a positive role in deepening our shared understanding of the Arctic through observation, research, capacity building, as well in promoting sustainable development of the region through international cooperation. Finally, I would like to propose that India may be given an opportunity to host the next or future Arctic Science Ministerial meeting in India. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Vardhan, for your remarks. Next, I would like to ask the representative of Inuit Circumpolar Council to make some remarks. Dr. Dolo, the floor is yours.
My remarks will address all four themes of this particular session. The ICC represents 180,000 Inuit from across our traditional territory, which encompasses the entirety of the North American Arctic and parts of the Russian Far East. Collectively, we are the largest private landowners in the world. We have thrived in our homelands for thousands of years, accumulating detailed, intricate knowledge that has allowed us to survive and adapt. Our relationship with the environment is of a holistic nature. Disruption or disturbance of one element impacts all others. We have learned, studied, and observed the interdependent nature of our ecosystems. We have developed our own rigorous measures of quality control for research. Importantly, we are the first to see and feel the dramatic changes occurring in the Arctic. For decades, we have witnessed how colonization has resulted in discrimination, with science and research being used against us, often viewing our world in a fragmented fashion, causing detrimental decisions and actions. Inuit are rights holders with distinct political, economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right of self-determination in research and the utilization, ownership, and control of our indigenous knowledge. Our knowledge has both substantive and procedural elements that must be recognized in the future production of knowledge, Arctic research, and science. It must be recognized as legitimate and valued and engaged in a fair and just fashion. The co-production of knowledge requires our direct participation. We must be involved as partners from the inception through output. This is central to the recognition of Inuit expertise and supports Inuit research capacity, ultimately leading to the best available knowledge for policy and decision makers concerning Arctic issues. Positive strides have been made by Inuit including the work of the ICC, as well as the National Inuit Strategy on Research of the Inuit Canadami. To promote respect and recognition of our status, rights, and role in research, there are constructive measures that states can take to improve future Arctic research. For example, engaging Inuit as partners in research agenda setting to ensure Inuit-driven research priorities are acted upon.